This interview with Ash Bohrer that you are about to see was recorded on Tuesday, June 24th, but we have a really important update. So earlier today, Thursday, Ash, along with one other hunger striker, both of them were on their 18th day of hunger strike, they, along with 6 other members of Jewish Voice for Peace Chicago, were arrested. They were arrested at Senator Tammy Duckworth's office for demanding a meeting in person. Senator Duckworth has repeatedly dodged their request for a constituent meeting about the situation in Gaza. You can call Senator Duckworth's Chicago office at 312-886-3506. That's 312-886-3506. Or you can call her Washington, D.C. office at 202-224-2854 and demand an end to U.S. weapons sales to Israel. This is a total outrage. You have people who were arrested who are on an 18-day so far, on their 18th day of a hunger strike. They're in wheelchairs, and as you can see, they are handled not without a lot of care, and they were detained. And it is an outrage that in this country, the crime is not supporting or engaging in genocide. The crime is protesting it.
Okay, calm down.
Yeah, so I and other members of the JVP Chicago chapter are on an indefinite hunger strike for Gaza, because what we're watching in this moment is a manufactured humanitarian crisis of starvation. There are 2 million people in Gaza who have been going without food, without water, without medicine, almost completely since Israel unilaterally broke the ceasefire in March. And we already know that that situation only intensified so much want and need over the last 19 months of bombing and 20 years of blockade before that. So we're on hunger strike to demand that our government do everything in its power to stop the starvation. And we know that the clearest and shortest path to doing that is to stop arming Israel.
And where did this idea come from?
Yeah, so when we were at the national member meeting for Jewish Voice for Peace, which was just an incredible meeting of Jews and allies in the pro-Palestine movement about a month ago, as several Palestinian leaders from various organizations across the movement came to us and said, the thing that we are watching and waking up every day fearing is that our friends, our family, our community members are at imminent risk of starvation. And we need you to do everything you can in order to call attention to the starvation in Gaza and hopefully to end it. And so those of us who were at the national member meeting brought this idea back to the chapter. And one of the ideas that came out of strategizing about how, what would it take to actually make every person in the US understand the starvation of epic proportions and feel moved enough to do everything that they can to stop it. And so we've taken on this tactic of a hunger strike, which has deep roots and deep learning in anti-imperialist and anti-colonial struggles across the world, of course, including in Palestine and by Palestinians, especially political prisoners.
Right. And of course, a fascinating thing is I actually did a live show on this in Ireland, but there's a kind of amazing connection between hunger strikers in Palestine prisons and hunger strikers in Irish prisoners. So that's a really fascinating and inspiring connection that exists there.
We actually just today, earlier today at noon, had a teach-in with an organization called Chicago Irish for Palestine that did a teach-in in Chicago about the history of hunger strikes and the Ireland-Palestine connection, really bringing to life how important and how powerful this tactic has been at moving people in Ireland and in Palestine. And we take so much inspiration from the people who come before us who have used this tactic really bravely.
Oh, wow. And I didn't even know that. So that was not just a setup for Ash. So speaking of hunger strikes, we're going to get more into kind of the connection between hunger strikes and colonialism, also colonialism and Palestine. But, according to an Al Jazeera news update, I see that 56 people have been killed near aid sites in the last day, with at least 86 killed throughout Gaza more broadly. According to the UN Rights Office, there have been at least 40 people killed at the private, quote unquote, private aid distribution sites associated with the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation since operations began on May 27th. And of course, this is at the same time that there is all this distraction about a ceasefire or not in Iran, which of course is very important, but it helps take away focus from Gaza. And then Trump, of course, we're going to get into this later, scolded Israel for breaking it. The genocide continues without any scolding. You don't hear Israel being scolded for starving people to death and genociding people. So what is your reaction to this kind of never-ending barbarity that we're seeing right now?
I mean, it's horrifying. Like, I think, I've said the word genocide so many times over the last 19 months. And I think sometimes we say it so often that we lose sight of what that actually means. What it actually means is that so many people, tens of thousands of people, potentially 186,000 people, if you go by the Lancet's numbers, have been eviscerated, right, over the genocide. And now people who are in such a state of deprivation, whose cities have been bombed, whose hospitals have been closed, whose universities have been dismantled, whose schools have been attacked, right, are walking miles and miles a day in blistering heat to try to eke out just a small number of calories for them and their children. And they are being shot down by Israeli military and also by US contractors. It's like there is, in a certain sense, like there's nothing complicated about this. Like either you are for the murdering of people seeking food or you are against it. Either you are for the collective starvation and collective punishment of children or you are against it. Like one of the things that feels really central to me in this moment is like my people have undergone a genocide and pogroms and horrible things. And one of the lessons that I was always taught as a child is that part of the reason that genocide was able to continue is because people stood by and did nothing. And I refused to be a person who stood by and did not do everything in my power to stop it. And that includes putting my body on the line, as I'm doing right now, and as I have done in the West Bank many times between Palestinian comrades and the Israeli army. And I will continue to do until Palestine is free.
So let's actually talk about your personal relationship to this issue and your personal evolution. What is your relationship to Judaism, to Israel, to Palestine? And how did that change?
Yeah, I mean, I grew up in an extremely Zionist household. A large part of my family lives in Israel. Going back and forth, my Israeli cousins, some of them lived with me when I was a child. I spent some time over there when I was a child. I went to Zionist schools and summer camps and synagogues. I grew up extremely religious. My family and I were part of Chabad for many years. And I was at one point as a teenager so convinced of the Zionist project that I considered joining the Israeli army myself. And everything really changed for me. When I was a young adult, I started learning Arabic. And the first time that I went to the territory between the river and the sea as an Arabic speaker and I started to see things incredibly differently. I started to see how discrimination and how apartheid are daily realities. I started to walk through checkpoints at which I was able to go through freely and at which Palestinians stand for hours and hours and hours. I walked on streets in Hebron where, because I'm a Jewish person, I was able to walk there while Palestinians are shut into their homes, unable to open their front doors. I have watched the Israeli army brutalize people. I have watched them demolish homes and community centers. I have watched them target nonviolent activists with arrests and beatings. And I have watched settlers do violence on friends and comrades with absolute impunity. And that, for me, is the absolute opposite of what Jewish values stand for. Like Jewish values for me stand like the number one rule in Jewish law is that in the face of saving a human life, every other rule goes out the window. That is the only thing that we are really commanded to do. And what I see the Israeli army doing is just so contrary to any Jewish teaching I have ever received, even in those Zionist summer schools and summer camps and schools and synagogues, that it really had a profound effect. And I really feel like using my voice as a Jewish person to call attention to the just craven distortion of my people and our history toward the end of violence and genocide is just like the most important thing for me.
So let's I just wanted to show this slideshow of you and your comrades. Here we go. So can you tell us who these various people are?
Yeah, so the people standing in the background are some of the hunger strikers. The person in the foreground is Rep. Delia Ramirez, who is my congressperson and one of the co-sponsors of the Block the Bombs bill, which would condition military aid to Israel. That's me, speaking at a press conference on day one. I look a lot livelier then than I do now. And this is Professor Iman Abdelhadi, Palestinian professor at the University of Chicago and local Chicago activist for Palestine. That's Illinois State Rep. Graciela Guzman, who is also my representative. And this is, we did a vigil for the murdered children of Gaza, which we read several hundred names in opposition to the genocide, because every single person who has been killed is a real person, was someone's whole world, was someone's child, was someone's grandparent, and deserves to be remembered not just as a number, but as a name. This is a beautiful kippah with a Palestinian flag on it at one of our events this week. We're doing events every day this week. If you're in Chicago, please come down to Federal Plaza. We're doing events every day. This is us, some of us on day 5. We've already been confined to wheelchairs.
And so those are people who are not usually in wheelchairs. They're
correct. Those are people who are not normally in wheelchairs, but for whom standing up for large periods of time or walking distances have become so incredibly hard at day 5 that they're in wheelchairs, as am I.
Wow. And it's interesting because you just mentioned that you've been needing a wheelchair. One of the
Yes.
things is that you're sitting down in a chair. I
Yes.
haven't interviewed you before. So for me, you just kind of look like you don't look exhausted to me. Can you, but I mean, I'm sure you are. And it's very deceiving because you're sitting down. But can you tell us what you're feeling right now? If you're scared, if you think every now and then you're like, why am I doing this? This is too hard. What keeps you going?
Well, I mean, just to as for a small anecdote, yesterday I went to a rally, a hands-off Iran rally with dozens of organizations in the city of Chicago. And the way that the microphones were set up, I couldn't move my wheelchair in there. So I was like, it's fine. I'm only going to speak for 3 to 5 minutes. I'll stand. And in that 3 to 5 minutes, I almost passed out and had to sit on the ground in order to continue my speech. We're experiencing all the symptoms of starvation, like body aches, pains, being freezing cold, headaches, muscle weakness, nausea. It's not a comfortable experience, but there is nothing that I would not do to save Palestinians in Gaza, literally nothing. And so there has never been a moment in all of this that has in any way dampened my resolve. I would say, quite honestly, it's the opposite. Every day I'm hearing from Palestinians who are telling me how meaningful this is. And if the only thing that I achieve is that Palestinians in Palestine or here feel like they are less alone and feel like someone is listening to their just anguish and terror at what is happening to them and their people, that is enough. I don't need anything more than that.